Forever, the biggest question has always been, what happens when we die? It's always been a question for faith, for philosophy, but what if science could actually give us an answer? Our source material dives into that exact thought experiment, and believe me, the implications are absolutely mind-blowing. So, let's get into it. Just picture it for a second. I mean, really think about it. What if we had hard scientific proof, the kind you can't argue with, that our consciousness, who we are, keeps going after our body is gone? Not a belief, not a hope, but a known fact. How would that one single discovery reshape, everything?
Okay, to really get our heads around just how huge a shift that would be, the source material kind of rewinds the tape. It takes us way back to see how we even started thinking about the afterlife in the first place.
So, way back before monotheism really took hold, the spiritual world wasn't like a courtroom. It was more like a territory, a wild spiritual ecosystem. Death wasn't about being judged. Nope. It was about navigating this other landscape, a place full of different spirits, gods, and unseen forces that you just had to learn to deal with. And then everything changed. The source argues that monotheism introduced this totally new idea, a single, all-powerful God. This wasn't just another spirit in the forest. This was the judge, the lawmaker, the architect of it all. And just like that, death became something else entirely. It wasn't just a transition anymore. It was the final exam for eternity. High stakes, right? So that brings us right back to our what if. What happens when that whole foundation, that idea of a final judgment, gets completely shaken up by science? The source suggests it would be more than just a big deal. It'd be a full-on civilizational shock. It could literally cause a central pillar of many major religions to just crumble. So how would it all play out, really? Well, the source material actually makes some pretty specific predictions for some of the world's biggest faiths. And what's interesting is it predicts totally different reactions. The key, it seems, is how important that final judgment idea is to each religion. For Islam, where life is seen as this big test for a final judgment, this kind of proof, it could shatter the whole system. For Judaism, which has a more, let's say, flexible view of the afterlife, the shock might not be as huge. But then you have Buddhism. For them, with ideas like reincarnation, this might actually be a huge win. Like, see, we told you so. It would be scientific proof of what they've been teaching for ages. And this right here, this is the turning point. The whole conversation moves from the realm of faith to the realm of fact, from the temple to the lab. So, what would this evidence even look like? Well, get ready, because the source presents a couple of really wild case studies. So, we're going to look at two specific cases from the source. They involve supposed communications from two men named Biagio and Federico. First up is a man named Biagio. The story goes that he was from Italy, and he sadly passed away during the COVID pandemic. Okay, so look here. On the left, that's a photo of Biagio when he was alive. Now look at the image on the right. This was supposedly captured in an experiment after he died. The source points out how weirdly similar they look. And it asks the question, is that him? A younger version of him? All right, the next case is about a man named Federico. And honestly, the images the source presents here are maybe even more shocking. So get this. According to the source, this face, which they say is Federico, appeared out of nothing but TV static. You know, that snow on an old TV. And look at the detail. It's pretty clear, isn't it? A whole portrait forming out of what should just be random noise. And then the source points to this specific moment. Check this out. It looks like the static is actually moving, almost like a physical thing, rising up and covering his mustache. It's presented as proof that something is actively, interacting with the static to create the image. Okay, so after showing us these, let's call them exhibits, the source zooms back out to ask the really big question. If this is real, what does it mean for all of us? For the future of humanity? This right here really sums up the massive shift the source is talking about. We'd go from what it calls a vertical spirituality, a God up there commanding us from on high, with morality based on be good or else, to a horizontal spirituality. In this new world, it's not about a commander, it's about consciousness evolving. Our ethics wouldn't come from fear of punishment. They'd have to grow up, to come from within us. And that change would lead to this really powerful idea from the source. Our whole relationship with the unknown, with the invisible world, would be totally rewritten. It would stop being this scary thing we're afraid of, and instead it would become a new frontier, something we can explore with maturity, not with fear. Which leaves us with one last huge question to chew on. If death isn't the end, if it's just a doorway, does that change who we are? Are we no longer just subjects waiting for a ticket to heaven, but instead do we become explorers, pioneers charting the vast, undiscovered country of consciousness itself?